Nadi. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Dallas. Thanks for having me.
I just want to dive right in because I'm so inspired by the work that you do and also how you show up and do it. So, for all of our listeners, right, we've changed the name of the podcast. And to celebrate that, I have handpicked some coaches who I really see walking their talk when it comes to being values driven and mission driven. And you're at the top of that list. So I'm excited to share your mission with our listeners. And I also selfishly just want to dig into it more and hear straight from you what all of this means to you. So
Yeah.
thanks for being here.
Yes. Thanks for the invite. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, great. So let's just dive in. Let's create some context. Mission, what does that word mean to you these days?
It's connecting to purpose for
Mhm.
me, which if you were to ask me that 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been much more uh, tactical. Like
Huh.
mission is step one, step two, step three, step four, step five equals end result.
Right.
Where now it's much more purpose, like it's nuanced, like okay, what's between the sentences, like when I'm coaching people, what is their value system inside of it. That's mission to me. And it
Hmm.
changes, it makes it super fluid, I guess is a
Hmm.
really great way to put it too. It's
Yeah.
really fluid.
Yeah, that's what I'm learning too about
Hmm.
mission. And I think that on it, if you would have asked me a decade ago, I would have really confused mission with being something stagnant. And if it changes, you're doing it wrong,
Ooh,
right? Like,
yeah.
no, this is my mission and it defines who I am. And I think that my mission amplifies who I am or highlights who I am, but it doesn't actually define who I am because my mission over time has changed.
Right, as
Yeah.
it should with
Right.
growth.
Yep.
Right, every growth edge would come an altered version of your mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit more about I want you to share with our listeners about your work. Before we go too deep into vision, talk about what it is you do in the world and how you serve people. And then we'll circle back to this mission conversation. But I think it's important for people to have context.
Yeah, definitely. And it's changed what I've done as the mission has changed and as I've grown. Right now, really my mission is to coach businesses at like as an equity and inclusion business strategist. So I go into companies, I work business to business, and I help them define their DEI strategy. I find gaps, we work with them, and find a way to kind of really create an inclusive and belonging space inside their companies. And then I also have the business to consumer stuff that I do, which is as an anti-oppression leadership coach. So I founded the Anti-Oppression Leadership Academy, and it's a space to take leaders who want to be inclusive and get them right underneath the rug of what is anti-racism, what is anti-oppression, like what do I need to know about the marginalized experience, the lived experience, so I can therefore lead them better.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
that's predominantly what I'm doing right now and
Yeah.
loving it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just also so good at it. You're
Thank
so
you.
good,
Yeah.
Nadi.
Yeah. It's an uphill, but it's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does your mission really show up in the way you make decisions? So it feels pretty clear to me that your mission is to help leaders really create anti-oppressive spaces, right? And really be on the
Mhm.
path toward anti-racism. How does
Mhm.
that mission influence the way the path you take on your own business or the clients you choose to work with or not?
Oh, good question. Because I've just started to get more. Like I'm going into year 3 with my
Hmm.
company, and I'm just now starting to get a little stronger in vetting
Yeah.
clients better to be able to tell who's out there and doing the work and really wants to roll up their sleeves and who's just looking to tick boxes.
Hmm.
So for me, I come from 2 decades of operations management. So
Yeah.
I come from running businesses. I've been doing it for most of, like, for my adult life, essentially. I've been doing that for with a micro edge towards communications and digital marketing. So that mission that I had to help businesses create their strategies and create their communication and develop their marketing strategies, that funneled into this in a way of being like, okay, I get that you're running your business, but I'm going to show you how to layer it in. So
Right.
it's not this whole other massive thing of like, oh gosh, how are we going to be inclusive and still run our business. So for me, the mesh of it was sort of my mission and how it mixes with this. Choosing clients is it's tricky because there's a lot of people out there who say they want to be inclusive leaders, but when you put in front of them the self-work and accountability needed to be an inclusive leader, it's really easy for people to put it down. To not change the habits that they have. And it's tricky. Yeah.
Completely. Or even look for, like, can I be inclusive light?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You see a lot of that. And it is really the tricky thing with if we talk about anti-racism specifically in business, it's the tricky thing with it is because what it means is you can't pick and choose.
Yeah.
So you can't be like, okay, but I'm anti-racist here and I'm inclusive there, but also I'm not really going to talk about Indigenous issues. I don't really need to know about that. Right? That's not anti-racism. And alongside, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have a marketing strategy and I'm going to have an internal strategy for my team, but I'm not going to do anything that's actually giving back to the community.
Right.
Well, that's not an anti-racist business model, So, and that's the pick and choose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is just highly inconvenient work. Highly inconvenient work. And so important and so rewarding, but it takes a level of intentionality. I'm new on my path toward building an anti-racist business, and I learn in public every damn day.
Yeah, me too.
Right? Yeah, I think that's part of being mission driven, right? Is you're falling in front of people.
Yeah.
And the further we walk that path, the more intentionality we realize it requires, and the more effort it requires, the more reward. There's no question about that. But it's definitely a commitment. And I can imagine the container you have to hold, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is a lot.
It's a lot in that area. But like speaking of mission directly, if I get really tactical about it, in my mission, it really is to make it easier than it seems.
Yeah. Yes.
Because looking from the outside, anti-racism as a business model looks like it's this massive mountain. How the hell am I going to get up it? And all I'm doing is slipping at the bottom. And I can't seem to gain the courage or the competency or the knowledge because the knowledge rate of change is so rapid out here, right? Pronouns alone changing so fast in that space. That's my mission, is to make it simple. And to help people understand that. I call it the cycle of intentionality, which is one of the first methods we go through in the anti-racism business model, like group coaching program that I run, is to get them to see this in a piece by piece. What self-work do you need? Great. What leadership skills do you need? Awesome. What operations, actual technique do you need? And you get those aligned into this cycle, then that particular piece of your anti-racism strategy can move forward.
Yeah.
And then we can look at something else, and connect self-work with leadership and operations. And then we can move that forward. And it's to piece it. So it's not this like, I have to do it all in the next 6 months. No. What can you focus on? Give me one thing you could focus on in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Let's move that forward.
Oh my goodness. And it's just building that out in layers, right? So that it becomes a way of operating instead of always this new thing you're learning.
Right? Yeah, because that burns people out.
Yeah.
And they have to change so many habits. Like, we as humans have to change so many habits to redesign the world that we're trying to create. Right? So we have to change so many habits in that. And if it's too heavy, the human condition is comfort is a habit. I don't want to do it. So I'm going to lean over here on defensiveness, or I'm going to lean over here on whatever emotion comes up and be like, yeah, it's too hard. And then they put all the tools down.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, with such an important and large mission, what do you do to take care of yourself so that you don't fall into, for all of the reasons you need to, right? Like, what do you do to take care of yourself so you can move forward on this mission?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first and foremost, I'm going to be super honest about it, is I fall off the rails.
Yeah.
We all do. We all will. And it doesn't matter what level of work you're at or knowledge, or you're brand new to it, or you're someone like myself. I don't always stay on my feet, and sometimes I can't see a burnout coming. This happened last year. I was pushing really hard and working with some really intense clients, and I didn't see the burnout coming. And all of a sudden it was on me, and it just floored me. It was a good 6 weeks before I could really open my laptop and be like, yay, let's do this work again.
Right.
So from that is yoga every day, without a doubt. I'm always trying to move my body. Just it's got to move through. It's energy is what's happening. And because I'm in these containers with people, and their energy can become really spicy towards angry, or it can be really sorrowful, and they kind of lean towards guilt and shame. So I'm nurturing that as well. So yoga, roller skating.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. That's something I picked up, and I just set up a little like space in my garage where I could kind of put on my skates and move my body and get hurt. To be honest, it's just getting hurt. Crocheting is like one of my big ones. It is one of my big ones. And for considering the line of work that I do, I spend a unreasonable amount of time watching shows about the British monarchy. But for some reason, Dallas, it calms me down.
It calms you down?
Because it's just so bizarre to me.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Did you really need to treat Princess Margaret that way? Anyway, like I could just go on about it. So I will sit there like a 90-year-old lady crocheting and watching The Crown. Like, but to me, that's self-care. That's part of it. So
I relate to that.
Ridiculousness helps.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I relate to the essentialness of mindless entertainment. Right?
Yeah.
Or even and also the routine around crocheting. I knit, right? But it's it's a routine. You get into this rhythm. It can almost become meditative. And for me, my guilty pleasure is Dateline podcasts. So Keith Morrison's voice, I hear his voice and it just puts me into a relaxed state.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, whatever gives that dopamine really is what it comes down to at the end. I'm dyslexic and ADHD, so dopamine is a challenge in that area. I was just hanging with friends yesterday, and they're video gamers. They have like some kind of gaming console thingy or whatever. And it just blew my mind that they would just go in and they'll spend literally 8 hours immersed in this virtual world. And I was like, oh, I need one of those.
Yeah.
Just to escape from the reality. Yeah.
Thank you for being so transparent about what self-care for mission-driven people can sometimes look like.
Yeah. You got to get creative.
Yeah.
And I'm a ridiculous person. So for me, it has to have some element of silly to it for me to feel that release. So that's kind of what works for me.
So the monarchy it is.
Like the actual, like the top dogs of colonists. And I'm like, I'm going to watch all about this. And then go teach people about how they can manage their businesses to not be colonizers.
So good. So good. So I feel like their mission and values go so hand in hand, right? So can you talk about, I'd love to just know what your core values in this season of your life might be and how they play a role in your life, but in particular inside of your business.
Great question. For me personally, probably my top value right now, and I've never been afforded this luxury in my life, is to heal. And as a racialized person, as a queer woman, as a non-binary person, my pronouns are she, they, I've never been able to just lean back into the healing process of what it felt like to grow up in a white society. And I was adopted by a white family when I was 9 months old. So I was raised in an entirely white environment, had no connection to my Indigenous heritage whatsoever. And I grew up in Alberta, Canada, which is an incredibly racialized place. It's the largest KKK organization in Canada that gathers every year. So all of that got internalized. So my values right now are really centered around my healing, which pushes, of course, up against like, okay, then why am I sitting in containers with people and helping them with their healing?
Right.
Like, but it's working in a way of like, my values are to heal myself, which is actually trickling through on how I want to support clients as well, is to help them heal from any internalized superiority or any the experience that they have of guilt and shame, that you've got to heal from that in order to be like, it's your ancestry, but it's not you, and you get to change the script.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one for me right now.
Yeah.
And intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably top dog in my business, is the intentionality, is to help people understand that they can be intentional, and you can take a break, you can take a breather, but you got to get back up and keep going. And that's the same for me, is that I'm intentional with the work that I'm doing. And that means with clients, with interviews that I do, with events that I produce, and just a lot more methodical in that mission.
Yeah. Is there a difference for you between intentionality and discernment?
So this is dyslexia, so now I just mix the definitions of those out. What's the what's the definition of discernment?
So for me, as I heard you describing where you're intentional, I thought, oh, okay, she's really discerning about who she works with and when she takes breaks. So discernment is about being particular about your choices.
I think that's the direction I'm going. Yeah, I like that. It's like, that definitely seems like underneath the carpet of intentionality. There's a depth there. Yeah, I like that.
I might be getting too meta here, but as we're talking, I feel like I don't know that. I think if you are operating with intentionality, discernment is a natural side effect, but you can have discernment without intentionality.
Ooh, I want to unpack that more. I'm gonna write a blog about it. That's interesting.
Do it.
Yeah. I want to unpack that more and see, because there's probably a bit of a key and a lock there for people also doing this work, like what that looks like, especially when you talk about business strategy,
right?
Because so much of it has to do with like discernment and then the intentionality. Interesting. Good point.
Great. Well, let's circle back. Write your blog, send me the link. Let's circle back and have this conversation, because it's gotten me thinking too. Something that I've been exploring lately is around the conversation of healing, is really exploring the judgments I hold around entitlement. I've just noticed inside of myself some fierce judgments when I witness something that to me looks like entitled behavior. And whenever it's that intense, it's always like, okay, that feels like it's an invitation to look at yourself here, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Right. And so I've been really looking at that and unpacking what that idea means to me and why that label is so triggering, right?
Yeah.
Because there's discernment around it, there's discernment there too.
Yeah, there would be. Yeah. And entitlement is slippery. And this is why, like, white society is really, really resistant to it and has a defensiveness towards it. It's right up there with privilege, right? It's like, I'm not entitled. I'm the same as everybody else. But that is the slippery part of internalized superiority. And it's a great thing to Google internalized superiority and dip down that rabbit hole of what that looks like as a white-bodied citizen growing up in a white society. You can't see it because you're swimming in the same ocean. So you can't see entitlement. Other people can see it in you, but it's a really, really challenging thing to be like, oh, me parking my grocery cart across the aisle is me exercising entitlement to the space around me. Subtleties like that.
Yeah. It's been interesting. Thank you for that. And it's something I'm exploring in this season of my life, because I have guilt around it, and the way it shows up is becoming too accommodating and perhaps rejecting opportunities to ask for what I want or take a certain stance or be more discerning because I don't want to be entitled. So I'm like really looking at the dark side of my intentions around that, because they don't always serve me.
Yeah, and there's a jagged edge there, because at that point you're looking at your identity and then you're looking at a habit in that space. Yeah, it's that angle. It's tricky. Who am I as a person, and who am I as an entitled person? showing up in the world around me. That discernment right there,
Mhm.
it's challenging. And again, this is when a lot of people will put the tools down because it gets too hard and
Yeah,
comfort is easier.
yeah, completely.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward, and it's a year from today. And if we were having the part two of this conversation a year from today, is there anything that you hope to look back on and celebrate? Or is there any new edge you hope to be approaching a year from now?
Hmm. I'm really goal driven, and that comes
Mhm.
from being a single mother and raised in poverty and on my own since I was 15. So I'm really goal driven in the company as far as like revenue targets. So going into year 3, there's really lofty numbers that I'm
Yeah,
playing with and strategies that I'm putting out. So in a year, definitely to look at that and be able to be like, nailed it.
yeah, yeah.
That's for sure. As a person, I'd like in a year from now, I would love to be able to look back and be like, wow, you came through some shadow work,
Mm,
and the shadow work gets easier.
mhm.
Because if I think of where I was a year ago now to now, the shadow work has gotten easier, but it's also like I'm right now I'm processing anger and I'm
Yeah.
processing resentment as part of my healing journey, which is heavier. It's got
Mhm.
more weight to it than just trying to process being able to speak and take up space in a meeting. That's where I was,
Yeah.
you know? So it's, yeah, so that's a big one for me in a
Mhm.
year. And it's just the peace side of it. I'm an anxious person, I'm a worrier. Naturally, I worry, naturally, I'm anxious, so I can get into my head and spin like crazy down narratives that aren't probably ever gonna happen.
Mhm.
So, it's just kind of like a little more stable, I guess is what I feel. When you said that, I felt like it was just grounded, just
Yeah.
more stable at the base, that the top of the tree doesn't really shake about. If it does, I'm not bothered at the root level.
Mm. That's a great metaphor.
The name
Yeah.
of my company is Accountable Roots.
Yeah.
That's the name of my company. So a lot of,
Right.
yeah, it's Accountable Roots. So that's the work that we do, is help organizations build really strong roots.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, I look forward to catching up a year from now, right? And seeing those numbers like almost be laughable, right? But then, you talked about your value being healing, so it'll just be interesting to hear or see what role healing is playing a year from now.
Yeah, and I can see what's happening because with the healing, I am naturally stepping into my leadership, and
Mhm.
I'm naturally stepping into my ability to speak about what it's like inside an oppressed existence. But I
Mhm.
can't do that unless I'm healed.
Mhm.
So I think that direct line is really going to be a strong point in a year. Is the more that I can talk about not the trauma of the experience, but the intellect of the experience,
Mhm.
and that helps guide people through without shame, blame, guilt, or really any kind of drama. That
Mhm.
healing component is going to help in that area because I'm going to be able to stand up taller and share
Yeah.
and know how to help people through.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for coming on the show today. This was a really fun conversation to have. And I just admire the work that you do so much and the way in which you approach it. So thanks for sharing your values with us and talking more about your mission.
Thank you for having me, Dallas. This was an awesome chat. I mean, I could talk about this all day long. So
Yeah, totally. Great.
it's amazing. Thanks, friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you at the next episode.